Cloud, here we go. Nice. So now everybody in posterity will be able to hear it. So we get up our introductions. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our workshop today. Our first presenter is Rita Jacobs, who is a retired probate lawyer from Lansing, Michigan. She's devoted her retirement years to learning all the things about government that were omitted from her formal education. She served 2 years as co-chair of the Peace Action Committee and is a founding member and former co-chair of the Banking and Monetary Reform Committee. She joined the Green Party in 2015 and has served in several officer positions of the Green Party of Michigan and the Capital Area Greens. She's been a delegate to the National Committee for the last 5 years. Howard Switzer is an ecological architect who joined the Green Party in 2000. He's been state co-chair in Tennessee and was a national delegate for 18 years. He is the president of the Alliance for Just Money and co-chair of the Banking and Monetary Reform Committee of the Green Party. He's an active advocate for monetary reform and an advisor to the American Monetary Institute. Thank you both for presenting this workshop today. As you know, I'm a big believer in monetary reform, and I'm very interested to hear what you have to say. I'm not sure who wants to go first, so
I will be going first, and I need to share my screen.
perfect. Thank you, Rita.
Okay, I'm assuming everyone can see that okay.
I think so.
All
Okay.
right. Welcome to whoever is here. It looks like we should have more people coming, so there were at least 5 signed up for it, I think. They're probably having trouble finding it like we did. Anyway, we're covering a lot of ground here, and hopefully we'll get through all of what we want to present so we can have questions and answers if we need, so if somebody has questions. So I'll just go ahead and start here. Our question is, do we want our nation's money created by a private for-profit business issuing money as debt, or do we want a publicly issued money by government as a public asset for the general welfare? We have a system of debt money that we will explain in more detail, and our goal is to change that system whereby the government creates money that is issued into the economy as an asset and not backed by a debt. Before we start here, it's helpful to have some definitions on what we're talking about. The monetary system is a system by which a government provides money in a country's economy. Monetary reform is any movement or theory that proposes a system of supplying money and financing the economy that is different from the current system. Money creation is the process by which the money supply of a country is increased. So in other words, how new money is created. And okay, what is money? This money is difficult to define. The main use of money should be something that's a means of exchange. Money may consist of pieces of paper or metal coins. It's the trust of the people in its value that arises because the government has declared by law that it is a generally accepted means of exchange and the legal means for payment of debts and taxes. It is the basis of this legal establishment and trust that really defines it as money. And how is our money created and put into circulation? For purposes of money creation, banks simply make keystrokes in a borrower's account, which creates that money when it is loaned. This is one way that new money enters circulation. Money is also created by primary dealer banks that buy government securities, such as treasury notes and bonds. Those are debt instruments that the government promises to repay with interest. The primary dealer banks create money by entering keystrokes in their own accounts and using that money to buy the treasury securities. And what is actually happening in this process is the banks are creating money and loaning it back to the government. So all the money that we have is created through some type of debt. That's why we call it debt money. And it's simply the banks create it. And I'll give you a quote here from John Kenneth Galbraith. Do not be alarmed by simplification. Complexity is often a device for claiming sophistication or evading simple truths. Of course, we've always thought that the government creates money and the government only creates the coins. Okay. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution gave Congress the power to create money and regulate its value. And we want to know, what did Congress do with this power? It enacted the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which is still in effect today. That act created the regional Federal Reserve banks that have the principal responsibility of regulating the member banks that own the Federal Reserve banks. And they are strictly private banks, and the Federal Reserve System is not part of the government. The system itself, created by Congress, causes our money to constantly decrease in value. So they created a private debt money system where 97% of money in circulation is electronic bank money. And they created a system where the value of money constantly decreases. This is a picture of Napoleon, and that's here just to give you an example of how long we've had debt money in existence. It's actually been for centuries. And here's what Napoleon Bonaparte said about it. Terrorism, war, and bankruptcy are caused by the privatization of money issued as a debt and compounded by interest. When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation, since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes. And what happens when loans are paid off? The banks keep the interest on the loans as their profit. And the principal that's paid back is not put back into circulation. It is simply extinguished on the bank's balance sheets, I guess you would call it, and it removes that from circulation, reduces the money supply. And what are some problems caused by the monetary system? Well, first of all, money for payment of the interest is not created. So they only create money that is loaned or principal of debts. So one thing that happens, because they have to make more loans, so there'll be enough money in circulation to pay interest on the debts that are already out there. The constant growth is required of the money supply. So every bit of money that's put out into circulation is a result of a debt. And also the banks determine where to loan the money, and by loaning less money into the circulation, it causes recessions and depressions and so forth, which result in foreclosures. And also creates a situation where the money actually goes to the top and creates the wealth inequality that we have.
Yeah, every depression and recession is a big transfer of wealth, you see, because they make money on the boom side by making the loans, and then on the crash side, they gather the wealth that was used as collateral to secure the loans. And of course, when it crashes, there's lots of defaults. But as this graph shows here, it also transfers wealth systematically, constantly, every day. And this is a graph showing household income brackets across the bottom there, from the bottom 1 to the top 10%. And to the left, the height is about net interest transferred. And so you see at 0, most of us are paying interest, while a few are gaining the interest. And of course, that is from 1988. It's much more, it's worse today. That graph looks nastier today. And of course, the 1% are way up there with that wealth transferred. And 45% of the cost of everything we buy is interest, because at every step along the way, from the raw materials to the manufacturing and distributing and all of that, there's loans involved in all those steps and debt involved in all those steps. So 45% is interest. If we could get rid of interest, we'd have a much nicer economy.
Sure would. The banks decide the nature of our society, because they also decide who gets the loans. So not only do they create money when they make the loans, but they decide where to loan the money. This allows them to invest their own funds in a corporation, put some of their bank officers on the board of directors, and also loan the bank money. So in that way, they create power over the corporations.
And that was proved actually in 1912. So this has been going on for a long time. The banks controlled every industry in 1912. The Pujo Committee investigation proved it, and even created a diagram showing the network of ownership that led to JP Morgan at the middle.
Just want to chime in. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an environmentalist, but I'm also an owner of a precious metals company, Real Money. And I just wanted to say that, I mean, before I get into my opinion, we do have to work on mining.
Not actually at time for opinions yet. This is the actual presentation. So if you could hold your questions, to the Q&A section, that would be perfect.
No problem. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, please continue.
Okay. This includes not only oil companies, defense contractors, but also retailers, real estate companies, healthcare providers, insurance companies, and the corporations that own and control the media. This slide, by the way, came from our website. We have a website, and it's greensformonetaryreform.org, and we will put that in the chat. Many of the other things that we're going to talk about here, we also will put links in the chats to the source of the information, so that if you want to look into any of this later, you will have the links to do so. So what do banks do with their accumulated wealth? Well, like I said, they control corporations quite a bit. They invest in other business opportunities, and they also control the government. In 2009, a study was done that traced the ownership of half the shares in 299 of the largest corporations to 30 owners, most of which were banks and financial institutions. And through campaign contributions and lobbying, the banks have gained virtually complete control of the government and also the media. In the 2020 election cycle, they spent $2.9 billion on campaign contributions to both political parties and on lobbying. Okay, this slide here gives you an example here. In 2020, the Federal Reserve did a study on bank holding companies and reported on it. It showed that they own 16 utilities, 479 insurance companies, 2,388 real estate firms, 1,682 healthcare and social assistance companies, and 5 mines. And JP Morgan and Goldman together had a total of 20 to 25 ships under time charters or voyages transporting oil and liquefied natural gas. Yeah, I might mention here what bank holding companies are. Generally, the bank holding company owns the bank, but does not engage in banking itself. So banking profits are invested in other businesses. So this is an idea of that. And also, I have further information from Senate investigations and hearings that were reported from 2012 through 14. Bank holding companies at that time had 14,420 subsidiaries, and only 19 of them were traditional banks. The largest Wall Street banks owned substantial amounts of commodities like oil, aluminum, copper, natural gas, and even uranium. They owned at least 104 metal warehouses and had complaints coming from beer and soda manufacturers that the banks controlled the London Metal Exchange and were rigging the price of aluminum. And here are some examples of other investments. Morgan Stanley leased more than 100 oil storage tank fields and had 100 ships under charters for movement of oil products, and leased 19 natural gas storage facilities. JP Morgan had a total base metal inventory of $8 billion. Bank of America had 23 oil storage facilities and 54 natural gas facilities leased for storage. Also, I wanted to mention that very often these banks work together on many of their undertakings and so forth. They don't act alone in all of these businesses that they engage in. And again, there will be links to the reports and hearing and investigation reports in the chat. So what else do we know about banks? Well, we know one thing. They participate in the cocaine trade. And in July of 2019, JP Morgan had a container ship that was seized in the Philadelphia seaport by Customs and Border Protection, and who discovered 20 tons of cocaine located in containers on the ship. The cocaine was estimated to have a street value of $1.3 billion. So it's rather interesting to wonder how all that cocaine got in a bank's ship. I can't believe the banks didn't know about it. Now, bankers have de facto immunity from prosecution. Actually, there was only one U.S. citizen who was a banker that was prosecuted after the collapse of the economy in 2008. None of the officers or, pardon?
A minor player, we might add.
Yes, a minor player. I'll give you a little more information about him, but none of the officers or employees of U.S. banks were prosecuted. So anyway, the one US citizen that was prosecuted was actually working for a Swiss bank in London. And the bank discovered some of the books that he had altered, and they self-reported the discrepancies to the US authorities. So they actually turned in their own officer to be prosecuted. And actually, and this was a US citizen who was actually born in Egypt. And there were no further prosecutions of US bankers. There is a reason for this. It has to do with officers of the banks that belong to the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. They have some kind of international agreement where the officers of the banks, where the different countries do not have jurisdiction over officers of the banks that are part of the Bank for International Settlements. And that immunity also extends to officers who were fired from the banks for their transgressions. I would say usually if the US government wants to prosecute somebody, they just back out of whatever international agreement that's preventing that, but obviously not in the case of banks. And it's my understanding that the New York Fed has a lot of influence on the Bank of International Settlements as well. Okay, and who are the ultimate war profiteers? This is a screenshot from a article that appeared in the Covert Action magazine. And we'll put a link to that in the chat. And I'm not going to go in a lot of detail here, but this basically shows, the article explains all about how the banks benefit from all of the government contracts they get for making weapons. And if you don't know this, military equipment and weapons are the largest export that the US has. Besides that, they also work to help establish software programs that are meant to prevent hacking and so forth. And they do that, a lot of that for the military also. This is a very nice article to read. It tells you a lot of information about the connection between the banks and the military excursions. We have some graphs here. The first graph shows a relationship between debt and the actual money supply. This is the debt shown here in the money supply are from December of 2021. And it shows total debts of about $80 trillion, I think. And that includes all corporate debt, household debt, government debt, and so forth. Right now, the US debt is at, I think, $30.6 trillion, the national debt. And the green part here is the money supply at the same time, which was just a little over $20 trillion. So you can see that the debts are more than 3 times as much as the money supply. And so this creates a situation, of course, where all the debts can never be paid off with the money that's in circulation. And because the only way money gets in circulation is by the creation of more debt. This second graph here is the a graph of the US national debt between 1900 and 2020. And you can see how it has gone up, way up. And it's at right now $30.6 trillion. And the last little picture here is how the dollar has lost value since 1912 until basically now. It's gone down to probably, I don't know, a penny maybe. So the dollar always buys less and less. And that's because inflation is built into the system. Okay, necessary monetary reform. This is what needs to be done to correct the problem that's caused by the banks here. We need to require Congress to be the sole creator of all U.S. money, debt-free, and the privilege of commercial banks to create money and transfer all remaining operations of the Federal Reserve System to the U.S. Treasury. So in other words, end the bank creation of money and have it be created as an asset of the U.S. government and monitored by the public as an asset. This is just a little chart that talks about some myths of the money system. There's a myth that the government creates our money, and that's not true because private commercial banks create our money. And most people believe that most money is the cash or the coins and the bills that we spend and so forth. And that's not true either, because about 97% of all the money is bank money that's created electronically. Another myth is that we, the people, decide where money is invested. Well, we don't really. The banks can decide where to loan their money. Now, of course, the government does invest in some things for the public, but that's all done with borrowed money as well. But the banks, other than the government spending, the banks decide where to loan the money. And people think the banks charge interest because the borrower is using the bank's money. That isn't true. The banks charge interest on money that they create out of thin air. And let's see here. Now I'm going to let, I just wanted to mention one more thing here before I turn all this over to Howard. There is a video that shows that it's called "Who Owns the World," and we will put that link to that in the chat as well.
Yes, that is in the chat.
Yeah, and so that you can follow up on that. It's a very instructive video that it shows you who is controlling all of the money. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Howard and let him carry on from here.
Yeah, well, I've got some random notes, but on this part, I thought we ought to mention financial innovations, because every time you hear about a financial innovation, watch out, because it means they're going to make the rich richer. And so derivatives and all of that business, the cryptocurrency thing, all that business is the same thing, kind of an investment scam. And then we have this thing called CBDC that they're talking about, and they're talking about this world around. And CBDC is a different kind of thing. Now, it is a control mechanism, potentially. They're trying to sell it as convenience for everybody. It's more efficient, it's faster, and all of that kind of stuff. But there are a lot of reasons why we wouldn't want that. And so we should oppose it strongly. Next slide. Because right now, though, the CBDC is currently undefined, and it would be against the law for the central bank to issue any currency. But the into circulation, and it's so we don't really know what it is. It's not been defined, but the potential for a programmable currency is incredible. They're claiming, of course, it's faster and safer, and it'll help the unbanked, as if the unbanked are unbanked because they don't have a bank. I mean, if they had an income, they'd probably have a bank account. Further centralization of private control, of course, they can do this through biometrics, and surveillance capitalism, programmable micromanagement control through the money system, where they could turn your money off totally if you were trying to get to a protest, or they could turn your money off and keep you just in a certain area, or to buy just certain things. And possibly even certain things from a certain person at a certain location. And I mean, micromanagement control is pretty bizarre. And of course, it'll be used politically, as everything is. It's not a public money system. It's not monetary reform. Anybody trying to sell you on that idea, you can dismiss it, because this is a dangerous thing that we need to oppose. And of course, there's a lot of opposition out there to it because of that. So we'll see what happens. Next slide. It has been implemented in just a few countries on pilot programs. I think it's about 10 countries or something, but there's 105 countries that are like the US. They're looking into it and they're researching the idea. And but there are a few countries that are doing pilot programs in certain, limited localities and stuff like that. I haven't heard any reports about what kind of a CBDC it is, and exactly how it's going. Next slide. I just wanted to mention too that Aristotle pointed out there's two roles of money. One is as an exchange medium, right? It's just money. And the other was an instrument of power, the hidden hand. And this was because money can be accumulated. And when it's accumulated, it can be used to control markets, industries, governments, as we see. So it's very powerful when it's accumulated. And of course, when it's created by private industry, a private for-profit, totally profit motivated industry, profit at all cost kind of industries, we have a problem. And of course, that stems from the nature of money as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and it's a store of value. And being a store of value in a private system is really, well, it is shown as just about killing the planet. Next slide. So anyway, I was, there's no school or university that teaches anything about money. There's no, you didn't learn about money in school. You learned about it from your parents or from your friends. It's just folk knowledge, and there's no classes you can go to study money. You need to, it's in the realm of independent research for the most part. But I went on the internet looking around. So who's teaching anything about money? And I found that Stanford University had a Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, where they talked about money and finance. And they asked, what is money? And they say, well, there's two competing theories. And one is the commodity theory of money. Now, that's the one where a commodity is used for money or used to back money, and a receipt for the commodities is used instead. And the thing about commodity money is that, of course, commodities are not controlled by the government. So they're controlled by private institutions, private companies and stuff like that. So in a commodity system like that, you still have private control of the money. And which has always created problems. And of course, the commodity has to be valued at more than what the commodity rate market value for it is for it to be money. Otherwise, it just gets melted down and sold as a commodity. So it's always been a problematic kind of situation. There's been a good thing about it is that it has limited it for a time when we were on the gold index. It limited the amount of money that could be created, which kept wages and production kind of in line. But in 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold index, production kept going up, profits kept going up, but wages just stayed flat. But the interesting point I thought was there's no money theory of money. There's the credit theory of money. Now, the credit theory of money is the one that we have right now, that where credit is used for money. And they issue credit, but then they put money in your account. And so that, as we have seen, creates more debt than money and creates problems. But there's no money theory of money, no theory that says create money and use it as money. And that's what we propose, because that is something that can be done and is one of the big secrets. One of the big secrets that Marshall McLuhan was referring to when he said only the small secrets need to be covered up and hidden and everything. The big secrets are kept secret by public incredulity. People just can't believe it. And so some strategies for change. I thought I'd mention, we have our national strategy, which is appropriate for a national political party, which is to pursue monetary reform at the congressional level. Basically, we'd have to elect a Congress that would do it, a Congress that cared enough about the public interest to create a money system that served the public interest. Right now, the private system, most of the money that's created today goes into speculation. It doesn't even go into our economy. And that of course, keeps it money starved and struggling. And but there's also potential for local strategy. And I would talk to local Green parties about this kind of thing. But if you could elect a local government and that was dominated by people who cared about the public interest, they could issue local money to pay for public works. And this was demonstrated in the depths of the Depression, where a local money with a demurrage fee was issued and created a massive success and prosperity for a year and a half that it existed. The central bank saw that it was so successful, they shut it down because hundreds and hundreds of other cities around the world wanted to do it. And so that demurrage fee caused an increase in velocity of the money so that they were able to accomplish $2.5 million worth of public works in this little town of 4,000 with $6,000 of money, because it circulated so fast, and it would go back to the government in taxes, our local taxes, and then they would just put it right back into public works. Well, the people saw that working, and they started paying their taxes in advance to make it even work faster. So that caused amazing prosperity. Now people think, well, how did they save? Well, they saved by investing in real wealth and not money. Next slide. And this is just greening the dollar. That's what's in our platform. Simplified version here, as Rita's already covered. The Fed becomes part of our government. The bank creation of money is stopped, and elected government creates and spends U.S. money directly into the economy for the general welfare as its first use. Now, once it's out into the economy, then it's just circulating and doing whatever. But to have its first use be for the general welfare. And that's a lot of money too, because the economy needs a lot of money. So we would be spending a lot of money on the general welfare. Next slide. And these all three reforms need to be done at the same time because the Bank of England was a private bank for a long time. There's some wonderful history about that we could tell you too, but for now, it was nationalized in 1946, but they still don't have any control over their monetary policy. The private banks control that monetary policy. So having a public bank for your national bank is pretty much meaningless to a large degree because the banks control the money. Also, Jackson and Van Buren revoked the second bank in the US. So they banned the banks from creating money. And that caused a huge depression because they themselves didn't issue money. They didn't issue US money like they should have because the economy needs money. And then during the Civil War, Lincoln created the debt-free greenbacks issued into the economy, only about 450 million of them. And so after the war, everybody wanted more greenbacks because they were a permanently circulating medium that they liked because it kept, building wealth and circulating around amongst them. You wouldn't put it in the bank because the banks, you wouldn't get it back because they were trying to get the greenbacks out of circulation. And they even got Congress to insist that greenbacks be redeemable in gold, which of course that created a problem too. But the people didn't do it. They kept circulating the greenbacks, and they circulated actually up until 1970 or up into even the Clinton era, I believe, when he stopped reissuing them. Let's see, the government does better than banks, by the way, on monetary policy. History proves this. All of those stories you hear about hyperinflation and all of that was all caused by the banks, not governments. The governments had nothing to do with it. They had no control whatsoever. Next slide. And this is some stories of newspapers about the miracle of the Wurgle. And this was whirled around excitement about this because they were able to do so much with so little. And there were 400 cities in the United States that wanted to try it, and they were trying it. They were actually, cities were just actually going out and doing it, but they didn't know what they were doing. And so next slide, Irving Fisher, who was a prominent economist of the day, studied what Gesell, and that's who had the idea about demurrage currency and everything, was Sylvio Gesell, a merchant economist. And he wrote a book that explains it, and you can get it online. It explains exactly how to do demurrage currency, a stamp script, like Wurgle used, who generates so much wealth in such a short time for their community. I mean, they expanded their water system, their lights and sewers and paving, and built a ski jump and a new water reservoir and a bridge. They did all kinds of stuff for their city. Next slide. So the money system is a monopoly. It's a global monopoly. And that monopoly controls monopolies. So we have the food industry, for instance. We have hundreds of food corporations, and they're all owned by 11 big food corporations. Well, who owns them? Turns out it's BlackRock, the largest asset management firm in the world. And they own that. They have controlling interest in it. Next slide. Same way with the media. They own the media. They own controlling interest in it. And so, if the media steps out of line of the narrative that they support, then, changes are made. People are fired. And of course, today, a lot of the intelligence community is involved in reporting the news. Right?
There are billionaires that own the media also.
Well, they're owned by banks too. I mean, Jeff Bezos was, capitalized for 20 years before he made a dime, and by the banks. And of course, they're reaping the benefits now. So funding social media, same kind of thing. Next slide. And funding the police. Now I put a post in the chat about this. Corporations fund the police through the back door, and that's how the militarization of our police force happened. The cities couldn't afford to do that. The cities were already cash strapped, trying to pay the salaries of the police, and keep gas in the cars and stuff, But the corporations, through foundations and then through the back door, were able to really pump the police up a bunch and equip them in a military manner. Next slide. So it's all controlled by a big financial network. And this financial network is involved in all of the corporations and industries. And at the top of the pile is BlackRock. BlackRock controls like 1,600 of the major corporations. And who owns BlackRock?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Isn't it just a combination? Okay, go ahead.
BlackRock is owned by Vanguard. Vanguard owns controlling interest in BlackRock. Now, Vanguard's another big asset management firm, controls a lot of assets, but it's privately owned. And so its ownership is dark. You can't really find out who everybody is that owns it, and everybody thinks, well, that's all the old money. That's the Rothschilds and the royal family and all, Rockefeller and all of those big old money in the system. So we got BlackRock and Vanguard at the top of the pile here. And that seems like in fact, the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, told our Fed in September 2019 what they were going to be doing for the next couple of years, and they did it. He went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and gave a speech. I mean, you can even find that he told them what they were going to be doing, and they did it. So he was kind of like the boss, come to town to tell her what to do, tell our Fed what to do. And of course, the corporate influence is great. And we talk about corporate power and all that kind of stuff, but it's really the banks that have the power over all those corporations. As you can see, the finance industry is the largest of the donators, but all of those corporations involved in pharmaceutical, energy, defense, and agribusiness, they're all in debt to the banks, to the finance industry, and the finance industry sitting on their boards. But and so at the top part of this chart showing a 10-year spending by those corporations, but down below is just a 5-year study, and it's of the 200 most politically active companies in America. They spent $5.8 billion influencing the government, and they reaped $4.4 trillion in taxpayer subsidies and support. That's like 750% ROI. Return on investment. Well, the banks figured that out a long time ago. They figured that out back in the 1600s, that government was by far their most profitable investment. And so they started investing in governments way back then around wars. And they got governments in such war debt because they were also able to manipulate the wars through their networks of media and their business networks and everything, and to stir up animosities between countries and everything. And then they would fund both sides of those wars. And of course, they could decide who wins that war too by withholding material for buying their supplies, because they were funding both sides. So they figured out a long time ago that governments were their most profitable investment. Next slide. So power concedes nothing without a demand, the man said. And I'm thinking, well, we don't need to be asking power. We need to take power. We need to demand the power, so that we don't having to go hat in hand to anybody to ask them about, treating people decent. paying for education and healthcare and all the things that people need and require to make a healthy, loving society. And so that's what we're after. And we need to do this so that we can fund the Green Party's platform. Because, borrowing money to try and do our platform is just a no-go. Yeah, that won't happen that way for sure. All right, thank you, man. So Moshe, you have some questions.
Yeah.
Before we start with
go ahead.
questions and answers and everything, so I want to take a quick break real quick just to kind of touch everyone up on our time. So it's 13:52. We've got about 30 minutes, give or take, for Q&A sessions, and we want to try and use the stack system. And you can do that by using your reaction button down at the bottom of your control panel and use it to use the raise hand feature, and that puts you right up on the top left of my screen. And that way I can make sure I get everybody who wants to ask some questions in the order of which they raise their hand, which is super useful for me. Okay, so thank you very much for your presentations, everybody. And I have lots of questions on the stack. So Moshe, you're ready and up on the stack first, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a quick question, Howard. The thing is, companies like BlackRock, I actually have some BlackRock. When I wanted to get into environmentally friendly companies, so they have a fund for that invests in those. So it's I read about the history of BlackRock with Fink and Schwartzman. They eat Blackstone, BlackRock. They're big timers on Wall Street, but they're just aggregators. So like they take everybody buying these funds. So I guess that we're giving them the power because I'm giving them a little bit of money, but because I only have this small chunk, Larry he's managing the whole thing. So he personally has this huge power in the circles. So I just wanted to know what you thought about that and what we can do, to make these changes. I know he's finally getting a little more, speaking a little bit on environmental and sustainability recently.
Well, they were until that recent Supreme Court decision.
Yeah.
And so the environmental side of all those, and there's other companies doing that as well. And of course, that's going to be falling onto the back burner there for the time anyway, until we can get some way to stop fossil fuel investments.
Right. I'm running here in Maryland for the Senate, 39th district, with the Green Party. And then one question for Rita is, I'm also a precious metals guy. We're a coin collector and dealer, and I believe in real money, but it's done a lot of damage when they pulled this stuff out of the ground. And I don't know if should we give up on gold, silver, real, because that's something you can't print more of. There's only so much of it, but at the same time, it's done a lot of damage. I mean, I've read some things about new technologies where they can actually do it without any cyanide, and then they turn these mining pits into environmental places after they're done. But can that really be a possibility?
Well, for the most part, we don't want the money tied to commodities because the commodities fluctuate in value, and that way the value of the money can't be regulated.
But what I'm saying is gold and silver are money. Everything else is remember the US dollar was made as a debt, as a paper. We were going to redeem it with gold and silver, but we decided we're not going to. So now it's completely arbitrary.
Yes.
But I mean, cryptocurrency is also something they can fix, maybe some sort of, the idea is that we need a means of counting what we've worked for, a means of keeping that in a certain.
Right. That's why we want a public system. So we have control over that. So we can control the amount of money that goes into the economy and where it goes and for what, right now it's going into crazy stuff.
Right.
And
it's not being shared, and it's also limited. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. And don't worry, you can get back on the stack too for more of them if you'd like. Let's go to Amy in Arizona. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you. I'm late to the game in Arizona here, so I don't know if you went through a definition of banking versus capitalism. Can you do that for me first and unpack the connection there for me, please?
Well, banking and capitalism are very closely connected because it was the bankers who started capitalism. Capital equals money, ism equals system. It's a money system. And it is a debt money system where a for-profit debt money system where money is issued as debt and has to be repaid to them. So they're renting your money, so to speak, for profit.
Right
And so let's see, what's the other part of that question? Trying to get clear on.
Well, to follow up then, because there is really no separation between banking and capitalism. So I'm getting to, how do we speak about this without sounding like crazed conspiracy theorists?
Well, capitalism began back at the time of 1600s at the Bank of Amsterdam, right? Roughly. That was it actually started a little before that because there was a divorce at Antwerp, but basically it was really started going then, and they had control of the monetary systems of Europe, but they didn't have control of England's monetary system, which was the tally stick system at the time, and it had been in operation for over 400 years. And so the bankers turned their sights on England because they wanted control of their monetary system. And so they funded a propaganda campaign to stir up animosities against the Catholic King James. And they funded the invasion of England by the Prince William of Orange. And he became the king after that, what they called the Glorious Revolution, because there wasn't any opposition. The people were so propagandized, they said, yeah, throw that king out and put this guy in. and of course, he was connected with a lot of royal family already too. So it was okay, but he was a Protestant, you see. And so that's why the people supported him.
Am I allowed to follow up one time, Margaret Elizabeth?
Yes, please.
Let me just say that then, so to connect it up to the banking, when they got this king installed in England, 4 years later, he handed them the monetary system. And they had just created the Bank of England, which was a private institution. And they had the king give the monetary authority to the Bank of England, and which was a private bank run by the Lords, basically. And so it was a big profit making institution and funded corporations as well from there. And so that was kind of like the capitalism, right? And that's who the revolution was against. The American Revolution was about the money, because the Bank of England had made the colonial script illegal and crashed their economy and put them in a depression. And so after 10 years of that, they revolted.
Okay, and thank you. And then for follow-up, you had said in your presentation that there's no definition of money. There's no education. You basically have to be an autodidact to get even this information that you got even presented to us. However, I do find that there are cultures and traditions that definitely define money and definitely have figured it out. If you were raised in a Jewish tradition, for example, you definitely understand where and how to generate money on its own. So I wanted to just ask you further about when you said there isn't a way of educating about money, or we have a lack of it, because there are certain cultures and traditions that do.
I think what we meant by that was in our current system, you'll hear a lot of misinformation everywhere about it, and it's not taught in the schools. So consequently, there's a lot of confusion out there about it, right? And so the definition of money can be debated because nobody has officially, defined it. Although scholars have, and scholars pretty much agree on what it is. So that's not a problem. It's just that government, in order to keep people ignorant of the system, make sure that it's confusing. You know, so to maintain that public incredulity.
All right, thank you very much, Howard. Thank you for the question, Amy. Belinda, you're on the stack, and then I see Kevin, you're after that. Thank you, Belinda.
Hi, thanks very much. Thanks for this really fascinating presentation. I had one really small basic question, which was you started talking about what happened in 1912 and then I think sort of moved on to something else. And I wondered if you could finish the thought about what was important about 19.
Well,
I also just wanted, I'll just ask three at once and then you can choose
sure.
what to respond to. Then I also just wanted to ask about this notion of the banks creating the money. If you could explain that a little better to someone who, like me, who thought that the Fed policy, the Feds determined the supply of money and then loaned to banks, often at negative interest rates, of course, but otherwise at the prime to lend out then in turn for more money to consumers. And I wondered if you can explain how that concept is not right. And then actually also really quickly just wanted to ask Amy what she means about the Jewish tradition of teaching about money, because as someone raised in the Jewish tradition, that didn't sound like a concept I understood. Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, you know, after the Civil War, the last half of the 19th century, farmers and workers were demanding more greenbacks to be spent on infrastructure so that, you know, schools, libraries, hospitals, roads, all things like that. So that's what they were demanding. That's what Coxey's Army was all about. And so there were books, there were people out campaigning for it. Every political party that was of the progressive populist had at the top of their platform monetary reform. They wanted a public money system, and they so in 1912, you know, there were books, like I said, being written about it. Albert Cozier, a lawyer from Ohio, had really exposed the whole conspiracy of passing the Federal Reserve thing. He was trying to stop it and telling people what it, you know, what it was and what it was about. And without much success, but the Pujo Committee, it stirred up enough enough interest so that the Pujo Committee, which, you know, of course there was a congressional committee and it kind of fell apart and fell on this one guy, Pujo, who said, no, I ain't letting go of this. I'm investigating this yet. And so the committee with Pujo did investigate, and they found that that every industry was controlled by the banking system, with JP Morgan at the very center of it. And they even drew a diagram, which you can get online and take a look at it from the government. It's on their website. It shows that, so the banks had tremendous power. And the whole Fed thing is kind of an interface between the global banking system and our government. And that's what the central bank's for. The first one was set up in Sweden after the Denmark-Sweden War. And they are control mechanisms for governments. So all their monetary operations and all of that is convoluted and it's complex with reserves and all of that, which, you know, they create reserves and banks were supposed to have reserves and all that kind of stuff. It was all a bunch of baloney. It's a fraud. It really is about just control of our government through limiting what they can do with the money. And as Greenspan and many other officials from the Fed have said, the Fed is not a public institution. It's a privately owned institution. It's owned by the banks who have all the shares in it. and all its employees are private employees of the banks. They're not Fed people. They're not paid by the government. And so it's a private outfit, but still a lot of people believe it's public. And a lot of people believe the government prints the money, but actually government only prints the currency. They print and mint the currency. The banks create all the money. 97% of it is the electronic money out there, and 3% of it is the cash money in circulation. Of course, that fluctuates somewhat, but that's the cash in circulation, but it's representing money that was created electronically.
Thank you for that question, Belinda. Did Howard's answer get to the heart of it for you?
Did I ever get to the heart of that?
No, I think you really did by explaining that the Fed isn't a public, which is something you already said, but I sort of didn't put it together with it. I mean, even though the Fed chair may be named by a politician who's in turn owned by corporations, I understand better what you're saying, so I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, named by a politician. That's interesting because, that's true. And but it's limited from, you can pick A or B, or C,
They're all bankers.
elections,
pretty much.
You don't get to choose who gets to be the candidate, right? We only get to vote for them.
All right, and Kevin, you're on the stack next, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Obama got a list from Citibank that named his entire cabinet.
Right. Mhm.
Go ahead, Kevin. Kevin, are you able to ask your question now? Hello, Kevin. Are you with us? Kevin.
I'm not sure. We're not hearing you, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, I think you're muted.
Oh, it's not working.
So somebody else had they just dropped out and dropped back into audio, so maybe that'll work for you.
No sound.
Unfortunately, no.
You can put your question in the chat,
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that.
but knowing Kevin, it's probably a big comment.
We might be able to get the audio issue resolved too.
Because Kevin is a member of the BMRC, by the way.
It's the raised finger. Wait just a second. Is it now? No, unfortunately.
No
No sound.
BMRC is the Banking and Monetary Reform Committee, which is one of the subcommittees of the GPUS National Committee.
Yeah. While Kevin's trying to talk to us, I just wanted to mention that the most important thing that we need to do is to educate other people about the money. And we give presentations to any state Green Party or local Green Party or anybody that wants a presentation. We are more than happy to give it to them and try to educate other people.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
It is, no doubt about that.
And I have been attending DSA meetings just to kind of get acquainted with the DSA. And at some point, if I get acquainted enough with the people there, that I can probably suggest to them that we give a presentation to the DSA or local chapter of the DSA.
Oh, that'd be nice.
And
So I'm going to interrupt you right there so I can ask some
Okay,
questions so we
sure.
can keep going.
okay,
So I noticed during your presentation, there was a slide which mentioned the NEED Act of 2012. So I was wondering if either of you could elaborate on what that is, why that's important, and why that is a linchpin in doing what we want to do with changing.
Yes. The NEED Act is actual legislation that would change the system. In fact, our monetary plank is based on the Need Act. And it was worked up by the American Monetary Institute with Dennis Kucinich. And then it was vetted by the Legislative Council. Lawyers from the Fed were all over it for 3 years before it was allowed to be introduced. And then it sat in the committee, and they sat on it and wouldn't let it go for a vote. But it would change the entire system, and it's a bill that's got the complete changing all of the points in all the laws that needed to be changed to create a public money system, to stop the banks from creating money, and to fold the Fed into the Treasury.
Kevin, I see your hand is up again. Can you speak it? No, unfortunately. Oof.
Dennis Kucinich introduced that bill, and of course, immediately was gerrymandered out of his seat.
I recall that.
People have been shot. He had several actually attempts on his life as well.
So I think that Kevin is going to be coming back, and I'll let him in real quick. So Moshe, you're on the stack again. Go ahead, please.
No.
Oh, you're muted at the moment.
Moshe.
Sorry, I just want to make a quick comment point. Maybe the speakers can comment about. I think we do. I agree. We have a fundamental problem in our monetary system, which has to do with the dollar. We're seeing that right now with inflation, gas prices, and we might see that in food prices. But I don't see the bankers as evil necessarily. I see they're in a system that they, the Jamie Dimon, the heads of these banks, which they inherited a system where they're supporting the fossil fuel industry. They're supporting all of these industries. But we can actually just change. We can just switch the switch, and they can still do what they're doing, but they can be supporting green initiatives. For example, reforestation. I mean, we're seeing what's going on with the heat waves all over the world. So this is going to affect us very soon, and there's going to be money to be made. I'm looking into now this whole seaweed farming, which apparently is going to be huge for greenhouse gas to take this out. It could be even more effective than reforestation. All the things we're talking about. So I just wanted to know what you thought about that. If we can just switch, and there's going to be money to be made. I mean, and if to save the planet, obviously there's going to be unlimited monies for that.
That's the whole point of getting a public money system, so that we have control of where the money goes and for what, because obviously the banks decided they aren't going to do it. In fact, they're going the other direction with it, more fossil fuel investment and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really a dire situation. And so getting people, I think, riled up about the money, that the money system needs to change. We're tired of a for-profit money system, and time to try something new, take it in another direction.
Okay.
Everyone, I want to let you know that we have about 5 minutes left, and I see Kevin is back and has asked the question in the chat. So
all right,
I'll just read it out for our recording. I wanted to say the precious metals are not actually money, but they have been used for money often in history. Using any commodity for money creates a lot of problems, such as keeping it in circulation, since gold can be bid away rather easily.
Yeah, and of course that was the problem in the colonies. The crown was using gold, issuing gold for money, and and of course in the colonies, anytime gold would show up there, it ended up buying materials from England, and so it went right back to England. And so they had to figure out some kind of monetary system to just survive in America. And so it took a while. The colonies tried all kinds of different things. They tried wampum and tobacco. They tried all kinds of things for an exchange medium, and they finally settled on paper money. And Ben Franklin wrote about it and printed it and for Philadelphia or for Pennsylvania. And so each of the colonies were issuing, well, most of them were issuing their own money. Some were using the other states' money, but it was all debt-free public money issued, and it created tremendous prosperity in the colonies, which is what caught England's attention. And they said, wait a minute, we don't want you to do that. We're going to make that illegal. And so they did. And of course, it was punishable. And so, the revolution began because people needed to have a monetary system in order to have any kind of prosperity.
So one last question that I see that Kevin has asked as well in our chat, and this is for either Howard or Rita. Would you say that capitalism is when bankers are in control, not inherent in the function of banking?
Yeah, I think so.
And Rita, what's your thoughts on that?
Because
I hadn't really thought about that, but
it's that private money system that is capitalism. With, if we
Well,
took capitalism, the private money system, and had a public money system, what would we be left with? It'd be free enterprise.
right, exactly.
The capital debt machine, which is
I see the monetary system as being the underlying base upon which capitalism is built. So if we had a different monetary system, I don't think that it would support capitalism.
No, it couldn't. Right. Because they wouldn't be able to supply the massive credit infusions that
They wouldn't be able to, the bankers would not be able to get in control of so many
all
other.
of that would start shrinking, and all those fortunes would start shrinking because they would have to be using their own money.
That's actually a great response to those questions, and this brings us actually to the wrap up bit here of this workshop. Everyone, thank you for attending this fantastic workshop presented by BMRC, which is our Banking Monetary Reform Committee, Howard Switzer and Rita Jacobs, who I think did a great job of kind of really getting to the heart of what the green position is about like banking reform and what money is and how it can be changed to better affect the changes we want to make in the world and to actually realize the aspirations of the Green Party itself. I think when you look at everything that has been presented here today, it's pretty clear that the Green Party offers the only real monetary reform policy going in the United States, and it's one that will work, and it's one that would be really effective and easy to implement. It's already, the work's been done for us. It's already written in the NEED Act. We simply need to implement it. If you
We
all
are
haven't,
the only political party with monetary reform.
we are. And if
Well,
you've not read the
UK
NEED Act, I suggest you do. It's
the
great.
UK Greens also. UK
They
and
don't count. They're not in our country.
Yeah.
They're in a
aren't
different
official
country.
either.
So in our country, we're the only ones who have that. And so
Yeah.
that's a fantastic thing. And, if y'all haven't checked out our Banking and Monetary Reform Committee, I suggest you do so. If you're interested in this kind of work and you're in your state party, ask them to nominate you to the committee. More people, the better. The more input, the better. And the better, more robust policies we get. And that's just about it, folks. It's 2:20 here in the Pacific Northwest. I think it's probably 5:20 wherever you might live on the East Coast. So thank you all for being here. There's another workshop on the same Zoom channel, Zoom 3, in about 10 minutes from now. It is the anatomy of the blob, exploring the structure of, I'm going to tell you the whole title of it in just a second, exploring the structure of the American militarism complex. So if you're interested in understanding the complex interweaving of finance and militarism, join us in the next workshop. Otherwise, I will see you all later in the A&M. Thank you all for being here, everybody.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thank you all, yes.